Hi, welcome to Leaders and Industry Disruptors. I'm Monica Melpass, and today we're meeting two men who personify that, Carl Bloomfield and Bill Rizzo. Carl is a managing director leading the enterprise risk and advisory division for the Graham Company for 16 years. He also oversees their New York offices. And Bill is the CEO of the Quantum Strategies Network and author of several books. His latest is Maximum Accountability. Welcome to you both, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Glad
Monica.
to have you here. Carl, let's start with you. You are an expert in a lot of things, but among them designing and negotiating insurance programs, implementing risk strategies, helping clients gain control in their insurance markets, also reducing the risks that come from a business, just starting any business. Let's start with a basic question. What is human capital and why is it so important?
Sure, Monica, thanks. It's a pretty simple concept, really, but it's something that is very difficult for companies to do. I think you hear the cliche all the time that people are our greatest asset, yet it's really much more than that. Human capital management is about investing and putting the resources in to maximize that asset. It's viewing employees not as just the cost of doing business, but truly as an opportunity to accelerate your business. And human capital management is the way that companies organize their efforts around trying to maximize that asset.
Okay, so it's thinking of them not just as employees who are on the payroll, but something to be invested in, to encourage, to build upon, to make better.
Yeah, exactly. And there's many different areas and ways to do that. And I think that a lot of companies struggle with trying to figure out how to do it properly or how to do it well. I think some of the easier things that they do is, they try to provide good benefits and they try to pay decent wages and they miss some of the other ancillary things that could really make a difference. Specifically, and we'll talk more about this, but culture, creating a culture that enables them to thrive.
Okay, cool. And Bill, you are an expert at a number of things as well. And Bill, you're a graduate of the Wharton Business School. You are also a former U.S. Marine, and thank you so much for your service. We honor that. It's an incredible organization. Also, you're an author of a number of books, and the latest is Maximum Accountability. It talks about leadership skills, not just in the boardroom, but also in athletics and in life. And by the way, you can find this on Amazon. What is the credo, Maximum Accountability? What does that mean?
Maximum accountability is how we operate as an organization and how our clients operate. It's how we work together with them to build processes to become more efficient, build teams, grow those teams, and have a leadership accountability across the board, which fits in line with what Carl was talking about. It's the culture of everyone working together, rowing in the same direction as an organization.
And at the same speed and with the same timing. It matters, all of those, doesn't it?
Yes. I mean, ideally what you're trying to do is set up goals so that people can work interdependent on each other, but they know what the mission is as an organization, so they don't need to be micromanaged by management, so they can make decisions as out in the field or in real time, so they don't have to worry about senior management having to give them direction so they can make decisions, kind of like in the military is done often in that way.
Right. I think employees probably, just from talking to them, sometimes bosses just assume they know what the credo is or the values of the company, or assume they know what the new direction and new strategy are, that the bosses perhaps have been in board meetings and mid-managers have gotten the update, but not always does it trickle down. So you're saying that get that information to everyone, make sure they're staying on page.
Exactly. You want to have it, you want to have information disseminated across the organization so that the most junior person on the team knows what the mission is, and that in real time they can adjust to accomplish that mission and not have to go to someone else to make that decision, because at that time could mean the difference between getting the job done on time or delaying the progress.
Well, let's back up a few steps and just talk about what is happening right now in the U.S. and the world. Among many things, one is the Great Resignation, partly spurred by COVID, but also many other factors coming into play. Why is that happening? And it's got a terrible expense for the bottom line of many companies. When you have to hire a new hire, it's very expensive. So why is the Great Resignation happening?
You may have heard the term a buyer's market when you talk about real estate. Well, right now it's an employee's market.
Okay.
And the dynamic in the workplace is that employees can demand a high dollar for their service, for their employment. And you used to say, people leave a boss. You don't leave a company, they leave a boss. I'd say the thing about the Great Resignation that's a little bit different is that people are leaving bosses that they like to go out and increase their own income, but to also increase their level of responsibilities. So it's something that's a little bit different about the Great Resignation is people are leaving for reasons that are a little bit different than in the past. They would leave their boss because of something, they didn't, culturally wasn't a fit or they didn't like that individual person. I'm seeing employees leave companies that they're happy with. They're happy working at that company. They're happy with that boss. But the market is demanding or providing such a higher wage than before that they're making the jump. And that's created an acceleration of employees leaving their companies.
And what's the cost of that turnover? You can add to that as well.
I would like just add a couple points that they are organizations, the way you keep those people, they may leave someone that they like, and I agree with that, they are doing that, but the reason people leave the organization is because they don't feel that they have a chance to develop inside that organization, and that's the key. It's not only about economics, but they want to have a real clear career path to say, where am I going here? Is this company invested in me? I may like my supervisor or my boss, but is the company behind him invested in me and my career and where I want to go? And that's the key, and that's actually part of maximum accountability is really trying to set up those career paths with those people, because if they don't have that set and they don't feel that you're investing in them.
That's a wonderful idea, and it has a number of layers to it. One of them is when you are the employee, and I've been an employee, I've been mid-level, I've had a lot of different iterations. Sometimes even though you see on paper what a typical person who came before you, what their career path was, you could assume that's yours, but it might not be true because times change, needs change, corporate, structures change for all kinds of reasons. So what if the way it was laid out when you were hired changed? Or what if, a parallel track with another employee, they're about to get the big raise and the big job title, and that limits your abilities? How about when those don't intersect on the path?
So what I would say on that is that the important thing is to really have it mapped out, and it has to be able to change, as we talked about that earlier. So if you look at, we call it a career success manual. And what we believe in is that when anytime you're in the organization, you create a 1, 3, and 5 year goal with your team members.
Okay.
And say, where do you want to be? What are the skills? And then once they decide where they want to go and you're investing in that and helping them do that, you meet with them quarterly with the different skills that they need to get to where they want to go. And then you assign them certain things, not only with their current job, but other skills that they need to do to get them on track to meet that. So when you're meeting with them in the quarter, you needed to learn more Excel skills, or you needed to do other training. They have that training, they complete that training, and then they're on path. So now they know that you're invested in them as jointly to get to the next level. And the reason why you're meeting with them quarterly, they may say, you know what, I really thought I wanted to do X, but Y seems pretty attractive to me, but I'm not sure. Well, then you can help develop that, so you're constantly with them. And it's a resource that you're nurturing, just like if you were having a client and that you needed to make sure you're nurturing that client, you don't just go down the line and not meet with them.
Sure.
And this is a way to do that. And it doesn't have to be the senior management, it goes down the line, and that's why the chain of command is so important, and to be able to lead up and down that chain.
And if I could add something to that, we're going to talk about onboarding a little bit later, but it's really important that it's a dual responsibility when you're talking about career pathing. The company absolutely has a role and should take a primary role in identifying those plans, those career paths for their employees. But the employees also need to speak up and talk about what it is that they want to do in the future, because plans do change, right, Bill?
Sure.
They come in a specific job, and then their eyes are open. A lot of people come in their job, they don't know what they want to do. They take a job, and then they realize they want to go in certain directions. So it's very important for the employees to be a very active participant in their career development. Nobody's going to come tap you on the shoulder. I know this sounds like common sense, but I've worked and managed people for almost 2 decades now, and how many times you'd find that you have an employee that just doesn't voice what they really want to do, and they're like, well, I didn't feel like they, at the time, they didn't feel like there was a process at the company. So having during an onboarding of employees, having it clear that it's their responsibility just as much as it's the company's responsibility to make sure that their career is progressing the way they want it to.
Okay.
And to add on to that, it's essential that you create the atmosphere where that happens.
Right.
So like people that are new in the position, new in the company, maybe a little more difficult. But if you have these meetings that you have set up and it's this process is driven in there, it makes it easy for them to engage in that and to take advantage of that.
And it's not just a quarterly review or evaluation of all the things you're doing wrong and hopefully some you're doing right. It's not a bad thing. I think a lot of people sometimes look at, oh gosh, I've got to go in for my quarterly or annual, evaluation. I hope I'm okay. Some people don't see it as the growth potential that it could have.
So I don't look at it, and it shouldn't be viewed as a review, because this is more of a career growth meeting.
Right.
It's not about the review of that. Of course, you're going to be talking a little bit about that, but that doesn't need to be at that meeting. It's more about, these are the things that you have accomplished. These are things where you want to go.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about hybrid life now in COVID, post-COVID, and the world has now changed going forward for who knows how long. That adds another set of challenges, obviously.
Sure.
Some bosses never meet their employees because they're working hybridly from home or partially from home and not in the office the day the boss happens to be there. So how do you manage people you've never met? How do you motivate people? How do you get them on board with, even though they might read an email or be part of a Zoom conference call and hear the words, but how do you really get them energized about what you want them to do when you haven't developed a personal relationship?
That's a challenge, and I think that the biggest challenge there is not, you can communicate information, and the cultures are going to be affected by this in the long run, and it's something that we are wrestling with other organizations. What we're doing is having quarterly meetings where everyone's still getting together as a whole organization. Teams are still getting together on different levels. So if you're on a team, they may get together once a week or every 2 weeks as a team. I think that's really important. Culture is hard to build. And you could say that you could get the job done and it can be more efficient, which I agree you can do. But the problem is that how do you get new people to become junior managers become senior managers without that? And that's a real challenge for organizations. And we're doing a lot of things, as I said, in team building that promotes that, but that's what the whole industry is going to be wrestling with.
Right. It's the intangibles that you really can't even say, well, when I was at the coffee machine, I talked to and had a great conversation with my boss or my coworker. It's all those sort of things nobody thought about until we all had to realize we're not going to get to have that for a couple of years.
That's right. And Bill touched on it before, but people really need to understand the meaning. Like, what does this job really mean to not just to them personally and their families, but what does it mean to society? Everybody wants to be contributing, especially the millennials and younger generations have this real big emphasis on giving back and being socially responsible. So as an employer, if we can demonstrate to newer employees, maybe we've never met them, what it is that this job means to society and how it contributes to the rest of society, and give them that purpose, they'll be more invested. And that's how you start to create the culture that that they'll be excited to work for. Doing the things Bill said, though, are pivotal. That will dry up, and if you let it go too long, that the team doesn't get together and you don't interact.
Right.
And can I add one thing to that too? Is that not only for society, but for them to understand what their role means for their company and their organization. The big thing about teaming is making everyone understand how critical their role is for the success of the team, especially if they're working from home 4 days a week.
Right.
You want them to know that they're not here in the office, but someone in our office or remote is relying on the things that they're doing to do their job. And if they don't do their job, how it fits together, this person's not going to get their job done,
Right.
and the mission will fail. So it's really to get them the sense of their work is really important, because if we don't do that stuff, we'll fail as our group, and then we'll fail our client. And
It's a
goes
domino
in.
effect.
It's something as simple as, and we had a conversation about this at my company just yesterday. It's as simple as showing them an organization chart and how they fit into the organization. They may have been hired by a certain manager, and it is really beneficial for that employee to understand how they fit into that department, but then how that department fits in with the rest of the company's mission. And so simply sitting down with an organization chart and going over roles and responsibilities of everybody in the company and how they impact all these other functions is can go a real long way.
Right, because it isn't just one card in the deck. It can have a
Right.
domino effect,
That's right.
It's multifaceted, and the puzzle pieces do matter, and you can't complete a puzzle
Right.
without that
Without
last
that
piece. 83% of people, though, in the most recent survey want to remain hybrid. I don't know if that's a pie in the sky wish, because they can also manage their personal lives a little better, or have some freedom to do outside activities. But the idea is that it might not work for companies to go forward with 83% of American workers or international workers being hybrid. What do you see as the long-range likelihood, let's say for the next 4 or 5 years? Is it going to be the majority of people are working at home?
Well, I do believe, and I don't want to be mistaken for what I said earlier. I believe that hybrid can be successful, but you need to do these things that we're talking about to build that culture. And I think that more companies, as organizations realize the rent savings, what they're saving in rent,
Right.
all these different factors, people are happier coming to work. So why not do hybrid? We were a hybrid organization before COVID, and we were big believers in that. The thing is, all hybrid or all at home and not having those teams is a problem.
Right.
So, and I think that this is not just this is a trend that will continue to grow.
Right.
I agree. My company was the opposite of Bill's. We were in the office. You were expected to be in the
Right.
office. It was important. It was a part of our culture. And our culture has changed for the better because of what's gone on in the last 2 years. And I don't think we'll ever go back to being fully in the office. Some industries, they're not going to be able to do that. But, I think companies have really had an open-minded change based on what's happened. That's probably the silver lining in
Right.
this whole.
And I just think it's if you have the right people and you hire the right people, they should be able to work remote.
Right.
And you should know that they're accomplishing what they need to do. And as a senior manager, the teammates would be saying, Bill isn't doing his job because it's affecting my job.
Okay.
And that will self-police.
Okay. It's not that you would not be able to tell is the work getting done, because not only would you see our clients happy, or reports coming in, our proposals happening, but other teammates would say, wait, I never got the review on this, or I never got the list of products that we're about to develop. There would be tangible ways to check.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about when you're hiring someone, which is an art form in and of itself. What is behavioral testing? Is it foolproof? Why should companies take the time to do it?
Right. So I believe that risk begins and ends with the people. And when you're hiring somebody, you have an opportunity right there in the beginning to make sure that you're not hiring or increasing risk or hiring a liability to your company. Behavioral interviewing involves really expanding what you're focusing on in that interview. It's not just focusing on the tasks that are required by the job, but it's understanding how people react in certain situations. And through those types of questions, open-ended questions on how did you feel when this happened? What would you do if this scenario happened? It's really getting them to think, and you'll get a sense for really their values and how they make decisions, which ultimately, when I said risk begins and ends with the people, it's people's individual decision-making that creates risk for a company. And if you can start to learn that in the interview process, more than just focusing on task completion, then you'll make a better educated decision on each employee.
It's a bit intangible, so it's not
It is.
easy. It
It's
can be
not-
subjective.
Yeah, it is subjective, and it requires training, which is why most companies don't do it.
Oh.
If you look at who interview candidates at companies, they've received almost, I don't have the exact statistic on it, but my anecdotal surveys are that 90% of companies don't train people on how to interview people. And they're missing a lot of opportunity. They're probably creating risk for their company because they don't know these interviewing techniques. And so that's what we do as an organization, is we try to help companies develop better process and procedure around the hiring process.
And just to add to that, if you have depending on which behavioral analysis you're doing, you can create questions to be asked from that, so you kind of understand, so you can elaborate on what the testing shows. And then on top of that, once the person is onboarded as an employee, their you can derive from those tests how they were motivated, different ways that some people are motivated in different ways,
Sure.
and then you could create that and give that to their manager, so the manager is able to help develop that person back to the career success manual through, so that they are a better way to get them more productive and then have them a happier employee.
Yeah, we're a big proponent of that. So we give each of the managers the personality surveys of their individuals on their team, and some of those surveys are sophisticated enough to give input on how I should interact with each one of my employees to get a better result.
Wow.
And
Well-
then you could also do the opposite and give
Right.
how that interact with that manager.
Okay.
Exactly.
From both angles.
Yes.
On both sides.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, a U.S. Gallup poll shows only 12% of U.S. employees believe they have been onboarded correctly or fully. They don't feel like they really know what it's all about. You can read a job description, that's one thing, but it's
Right.
much different when you ask them to do the job. You can also hand them an employee manual, a handbook, and whether they finish it or read it, who knows. But most people, 88%, don't feel like they really are fully equipped to start the job from day one.
So that's the interesting thing about that is that we only have one chance to have a first impression,
Right.
and you're trying to build these employees' loyalty to the organization and to say this is a great place to work. If the onboarding process is not effective, they're coming, what company did I join? Why
Right.
did I make a mistake doing this? Right away, it was, instead of having a positive experience with that. And additionally, on top of that, is that once they're onboarded, the way that they're onboarded, the documents that are collected, the things, goes back to the liability. There's certain things that need to be done depending on the industry to protect the organization for other things,
Sure.
for certain things, and that needs to be done, and that's an area that's often overlooked.
Let's talk about different age groups. We've had baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, all sort of their own take on life and on work going through the ages. Now we have Gen Z. They tend to change jobs, the 20-year-olds in that category, 134% more than all the preceding generations. And there are a number of reasons. Sometimes their values don't correlate with the company, as you mentioned. Sometimes that can come down to the simplest things, like it's not a green company, or they're not protecting, the indigenous populations are being impacted poorly. So it can really line up with their personal morals, and they would take that even despite good salary or good employee relations with their coworkers, good bosses, and they would leave because the company they don't feel like is being, fair to the world. Do you see that as changing? That's a gigantic percentage of change. They sometimes change within a year. There's no more starting as an intern, ending up as CEO, going for 40 years, right? There's maybe every 6 months they flip around.
Well, I think that change in changing jobs really started changing in the 80s, and it's just exponentially increasing. That big part of that early on, and when my father entered the workforce, they had defined benefit plans, and they were in the organization, and they stayed there, and they were retiring. 401ks made the workforce a lot more mobile. They could leave the company, roll your 401k over. So that was the beginning of making that change. This is taking it to the next level of leaving because for other reasons, not to motivate them. I do believe that all those things that we're talking about mitigate the risk of them leaving for those reasons, because during the screening process, if that's a big part of what they're looking for in the behavioral analysis and in the interviewing, you can select the people that were most fit with your organization. Looking for a diverse workforce, but then also trying to figure out a way to make sure that they understand what your mission is and how you're trying to accomplish it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think that trend is going to reverse anytime soon. I think it's only going to accelerate with the advent of technology to help it accelerate. I mean, it's easier today to find kind of gig work.
Right.
You can work at one job today and go on an app, and they can place you somewhere next week and someplace different the week after that.
Right.
And it's becoming just more accessible to do, and so it's going to be a problem that some employers will have to deal with.
It
Some-
is
some
81% of these Gen Zers who are jumping around and have no, qualm about picking up and moving on. So how does that impact benefits and packages that are offered? Sometimes you don't want to waste, a company's money offering a set of benefits, but other times you might want to lure in the Gen Zers and maybe hope for the best that they'll stay for 2-3 years.
Well, I think that the flexibility of the benefit programs that are out there, like 401k versus the defined benefit plan, they're allocated towards that person and their work today. Where in a defined benefit plan, traditionally it was you're spreading that cost over 30 years of employment. So you have to factor in what the cost of employment is when you're hiring people, and that's the cost of benefits. So you still need to offer that. If they move on, and you can't keep them, shame on you for not being able to keep them. If you need to be doing the things we're talking about. And in some cases, they're going to move on anyway. You look at that as an opportunity to have a future customer someplace else that knows your organization and liked working there, but felt there was a need to go someplace else.
Right.
So,
In fact, 76% say they would move on just for new opportunities, new promise of growth path, something they don't feel like they're maybe at a dead end or just a wide juncture and they don't like either of the choices. So how do you bridge that gap? Because you can't really be everything to everyone. And some people are going to go on a straighter path right up to CEO, and you can't have 3 CEOs. Not everybody's going to fit in that little tunnel.
Right. I think what Bill talked about earlier in career pathing is essential, and trying to educate employees on what the opportunities are within their industry. I know within my company, Graham Company, somebody might come in a certain section of area of the company, and then once they get there, they realize they want to go do something else within the company. And I think we do a good job of exposing employees to what the opportunities are within the industry as a whole. And it enables us to retain them even when their interests change.
Okay.
And we, to add on that, the same thing what we were talking about earlier, but we also have a real belief in our firm that if someone has a real strong interest in an area that we don't do, that's inside our, in our realm of what we do, that's how we initiate new practice areas. So at one point, we did limited, we do, since we have an HR managed service division, we do limited recruiting for our clients, and one of our hires wanted to do more of that, and that expanded that. It's a very large part of our business now, and a different practice area that we created because they were a great employee. They wanted to be in that area. It was identified earlier, and they lead that team now and have a large team working for her.
So sometimes it's people who have boots on the ground who really can see what a company might need or be able to benefit from, more so even than people who are trying to manage many sectors of a company. It's good to listen to your employees.
Yes, exactly.
Let's talk about work weeks, because I've heard everything from a 4-hour work week to changes in wholesale strategy of how to function within a company and have your life. So what do you think is the right way going forward? 12-week a year working, where you just pile it all into one summer and take 9 months of the year off? How do you try to cater to everybody's idea of what's the ideal work week?
Yeah, I don't think there's one solution. I think the idea is to be flexible, and I know your opinion on this is probably, I don't care when you work, just get the job done.
Okay.
And that's my belief
Nights,
as well.
weekends, holidays, work when you want?
The expectation is you're going to get the work done, and it's going to be done at a very high level, and I don't necessarily care when it's done. You're just expected to have a certain level of responsiveness, and if you want to go to your daughter's lacrosse game, go to the lacrosse game. We want you to go to the lacrosse game, but if you need to jump back on later that night to finish something up, then that's what's expected.
Right.
Yeah, so I agree. So our philosophy has always been that, you work 24/7 with a lot of time off in between. So never, I would be offended if you, it's just occasions, but I'd be offended if you miss your child's sporting event, dance, play. Go do that. Make sure you're out there, because that's the most important thing. You'll be a better employee and a better servant to our clients if you're happier doing it. Now, there's occasions where things come up and you can't do that. But if you make your own hours, you get your job done, you know what your tasks are to do. Now, that doesn't work in, if you're an administrative assistant, that can't work in every industry. Right. So it's flexibility around that, but really empowering them to be part of the team is how you keep people in the organization, like those millennials, to say, I really am making a difference here.
I think the flexibility is the key, but you also need to think about the risks that you might be creating for your company as well, and making sure you have a good, clear strategy on it. Like Bill said, the flexible work schedule may not be available for every position within the company. So you might open yourself up for suits from employees that say, you're discriminating the way that you treat me versus somebody else. They could give you reasons that maybe aren't really the real reason, but they could still make that kind of claim. So any strategy around work week and whatnot, you should definitely consult your advisors. A labor attorney or your insurance broker could probably connect you to the right resources there.
To see if there's flex time available or shared, job description, two people
Right,
splitting a job.
It's really about policies that are
Right.
set forth that you need to document in your, in the traditionally a handbook, but instead of having handbooks, have separate policies on everything where it's outlined. And you can have flexibility within those policies, but the important thing is a lot of people create policies, but they never follow them.
Oh.
So
That puts you in an even worse situation, right,
Exactly.
Bill? When you create a policy you don't follow.
And because everybody read it and they're like, wait a minute, what about page 112?
Lawyers love that.
item
They
E1?
love that when
Yeah.
they go through your own policies and they use it to.
Oh,
Because a lot of times people just pull stuff off the internet. When we're consulting with firms, we kind of say, okay, we read your policies. We say, this is what your policy says. This is how you're operating. It's your second policy. And then what would you like it to be? So you have three things. Let's make that into one.
right.
So
Let's talk about Prime. What is the Prime model? Explain what it includes.
Sure. Prime is a systematic, repeatable process that enables us to assess the material weaknesses in a company's risk management strategies. What we're doing is we're asking a lot of questions that really get to a company's thought process on how they approach risk. And through their responses, we're able to assess how well they stack up against what we consider to be best-in-class practices.
Okay.
And the process, it's 4 phases, but it concludes with a plan that we assist our clients in implementing that mitigate all of those weaknesses. And if a client were to invest in doing Prime, it would significantly reduce their total cost of risk, which ultimately leads to decrease in their insurance costs.
Well, walk me through the 4. What are those?
The 4 phases are discovery, analyze, plan, and implement.
Okay.
And just like anything, all 4 of those are very critical. And where I think in the industry, especially in consulting, where things usually fall apart is between plan and implement. Our philosophy is that if we tell you to do something, we're going to help you implement it and see it through. We just don't drop a report on your desk and leave you to figure out how to implement it. Right. We will help you all steps of the way. And that's where I collaborate a lot with Bill's firm, Quantum, because there's a lot of areas of things that we'll make recommendations in that he's much better suited to handle.
Okay.
And I should probably explain what PRIME stands for. It's an
Please.
acronym.
Right.
It stands for Preparation and Prevention, Risk Transfer, Insurance, Mitigation, and Education. So it's those 6 areas that really make up a holistic risk management strategy, and we can evaluate a company in all of them. Sometimes we might pick just 1 or 2 of them that is the focus for that particular organization.
How long does an evaluation like that take?
From beginning to end, it probably takes about a month. The critical part is the interviews with key stakeholders at the company. We like to interview people, and we like to go at multi-levels, right? Just like we talked before, that there's a culture and there might be the thought process, or the thought is the culture at the high level is at a certain level, but then as you go down to the middle level management, it's different. And when you get to the field, it's completely different, and it's almost night and day. So we do like to do interviews at all different levels within the company to make our assessment.
Okay. And can evaluations like that obviously are a key tool in knowing what the gaps are within a company, what the areas of growth need to be, and how quickly, once you've gotten to know the personalities of a company, they're able to and willing to implement changes. But do those evaluations ever get things wrong, or are they foolproof?
Well, on our side, I think that evaluation is not an event, it's a process. So you're going in and you're doing that stuff. So you're evaluating, you're looking at it, and then when we're on the implementation side, on the HR implementation side, we'll be going through it and you uncover more things. Like, because you're doing things like, not that we missed it, it's just that there's other things that you're uncovering as you go. So it's important that implementation slippage, as you talk about, is where most companies fall down. They may have great advice and they're not able to implement it effectively. Graham may do this great evaluation for them and say, you need to do this, but then their HR team isn't capable of delivering the things that need to get done.
Because they don't have enough people, because they don't have the time, because it costs too much money, because they've got other priorities.
All the above.
All the
Satisfy
above.
the
All the
clients.
above.
It's all the above, because depending on the organizations, it's, HR has, what I would say is there's 10 different areas of expertise, and you talk to different people and they say different things. But then for a firm to invest in someone who has an expertise in all of them, it's kind of like a law firm. They, you have different specialties.
Sure.
So they could call, we could be a resource to them or some other firm in those specialty areas because they don't have that specialization to do that, or they don't have enough people, they don't have the right people. It could be a bunch of different things.
Yeah, we don't get it right 100% of the time, but the key to getting it to be very good is that it requires collaboration with the prospect or the company. We don't come in and set the plan dictating to them everything that they need to do. We give them the information that they need to make a decision about what they should do. So the plan is very much a collaboration between the client and us. And that usually helps get a better result when you got complete buy-in from those on the other side of the table about what we're asking them to do.
And I read something interesting in researching this, and that was that onboarding and continuing education, if you will, a growth for employees, is far better, 3.4 times better results if it's done one-on-one with a person, not just with a handbook or an email. So people really, I guess, want to have personal training or have their mid-level manager come and sit with them and say, well, actually, can you do it another way or a different way or time it this way? So they really want some personal connection. Have you found that to be the case?
Yeah. Yes, I believe that in both cases. So I think that it can deliver the information in multiple forms so that you can have it in, or multiple mediums. You have it in, video content that they can get on demand. You have group sessions and you have individual sessions. Where I think organizations fall down, they may have a learning management system, which develops system to deliver this education, or they may have a training team, but they don't have a training team that training team typically delivers industry-specific training and not these risk management things, which really needs a collaboration between the HR department or someone to have that content to be able to deliver them in different ways.
And it really impacts different industries different ways because, for example, of the construction industry,
Right.
if you don't onboard and get some training right up front, I was reading another interesting statistic that most of the injuries are in that first year because maybe they got the directions or the information and read it too quickly or didn't understand it, were embarrassed to say, I'm sorry, I don't understand line 3. So they just said, I'll figure it out. And they don't figure it out. They get hurt. So it really does impact some industries more than others. Health and Human Services, manufacturing, distribution. How are some of those negatively impacted if it's not done?
Right, I think you quoted a stat there from the Travelers injury report. For all industries, it's 35% of injuries occur in an employee's first year, and construction's even worse, like you mentioned, 50%. And I think part of the problem is that companies are just so understaffed right now, and they're just struggling to fill open positions that they're not spending that time to onboard appropriately and to train. They're just happy to get somebody into that spot. And then you think about it, the hiring managers, they're often the ones that are filling in the gaps when there's these open positions, and they're just relieved when they get somebody. Well, to think about that, if they don't give them the proper onboarding and then they're going to get hurt, well, first, the employee safety should be utmost, the most important thing. We want everybody to go home at night. But then you're right back in the same situation.
Right. And even worse.
And even worse because the cost to your company is now
Sure.
increased and the liability. And so it really, I think, doesn't make a lot of sense that companies don't take that extra time to give the proper training. I think it's just a kind of a symptom of the situation that we're in right now with being so understaffed and people being overworked.
Right. Is it sometimes, too, that they just don't want the additional expense, frankly, of adding more people? They're trying to do more with less?
Well, I think that's part of it, but I do think it's, if you think about people aren't asking the questions because, they don't want to look like they don't know what they're doing their first day on the job.
Sure.
Second day, the first week we hired you because of X, and now you're asking me how to do something like on the backhoe. You should know how to do that.
Sure.
Well, I think it's important for the organization. Carl is an Army guy, so he probably knows this as well. But in boot camp, they taught us how to brush our teeth, like we didn't know how to and how to wash our body.
Marines spent 2 weeks on
yes,
that.
No,
But we only spend a week.
but with the assumption that they don't assume you know anything. They teach you from the ground up how to wash your body, how to brush your teeth, how to do everything, and like, you know, in a very disturbing way. But the point is that they assume that you don't know it, and then at the end of that, you know it because we showed you. So with the assumption the employer should be, well, they don't know how to do everything. We got to teach them everything and at least show them once, so now they know.
Yeah, we talk about the Graham way. When we hire an employee, they go through Graham University, and everybody gets this 5-month training, which teaches them everything that we do. But that's only focusing on the technical aspects of the job and how we perform the day-to-day functions. In addition to that, there's acclimation meetings and mentorship and other programs to make sure that they're really assimilating into our culture.
And that is an ongoing, it can take several months or more than a year, and it goes on for them?
It goes on for years. We have the on-the-job training is for 2 years after you get out of the training, the Graham University. Their mentorship program lasts for years. Then we ask those people to become mentors for new, and kind of the cycle just keeps going.
Terrific. Wow. Let's talk about fear, because fear is part of what holds some companies back, some employees back, some managers back. I read another interesting statistic that psychologists say people might see that there's an issue, but they're more afraid of changing, even if they're told it could help. But what if that's wrong? They would rather stay with something that they're either, just we've been doing it this way forever, something they know rather than the unknown. So how do you overcome that human fear? That's a natural instinct, and some people just can't leap that hurdle.
Do you want to get that? Or?
I'll take a shot at it. I think it's having a culture that says that this is not a zero-fault culture. Like, we can make mistakes, okay, and that there's no bad ideas, and incentivize people for throwing out ideas. We do something called lightning strikes. And that's when somebody has a good idea and it impacts our business. We call it a lightning strike, and they get something. So they get a gift card. It's something simple. But I think it's creating a culture where people know that, hey, it's okay to say something dumb in a meeting. Nothing's really, there's no bad questions. But having that comfort level of being able to put yourself out there a little bit, I think that begins in the beginning when somebody comes on board and you create that culture that this is the type of company we are. In my experience, I've found there's 3 different types of companies. I won't go into a lot of depth on each of the different types, but the third bucket, which is where I think most companies want to be, is they want to excel. They always want to do better. They just don't necessarily know how to get there, and they need a little help. So the companies that are in that bucket, they acknowledge that they can get input from, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It can come from the employees, it comes somewhere else. So kind of creating that culture. I've been saying that culture word a lot, but I think that sets the stage for it.
And just quickly, what are the first 2 groups?
The first 2 groups are, the first group is, I would say, are like zero fault industries. Like, think about the airline industry. They can't have problems, right? We can't have problems in the airline. The nuclear navy, certain industries that
there's a right way and a wrong way.
There's a right way and a wrong way, and it's protocol.
Right.
Okay. The second group are companies I just call lucky. They kind of fly by the seat of their pants, and they're the type that's the most fearful, because that's the company we do it that way because that's the way we've always done it, and it's worked for us. Right. But I say they're lucky. They're not good. They just hasn't happened to them yet.
And they could be rife with possible liability, left and right.
They sure can. And they're the companies that are difficult to work with because they don't want to change, and they have this mentality or fear of changing because it's worked for us. But their time, I don't wish ill on anybody, but it's going to happen. And then the third bucket, like we talked about, is the companies that always want to get better, and they recognize that they need help, and they're open to it. They're open to people helping them.
And I would say that middle company, they're the clients who come to us when it's falling down.
When it's too late, right? When it's
and we are able to help them, but that's like the emergency pull the cord client, where the other ones are hiring is to help streamline the stuff early on
and it ends up costing them a lot more money, right?
Sure.
When they come to you when the building's burning, it costs a lot more money. So
because there's the liabilities that they already are incurring that you're trying to clean up for them.
Right. There's also something called optimistic denial, and that can be by employees, by bosses, by an entire company probably, where maybe somebody, let's take it from the employee level, sticks around because they think, well, I might get a raise, or well, I might get a promotion and have a new area of growth. Well, I'll just stick it out. I don't really like it. It's not a perfect fit, but they're optimistically denying what the realities of the marketplace or of their current job are. And how do you build a good team spirit if you just have people who are sort of muddling along in the middle like that?
Well, see, you try not to have that, because I'm a huge believer is that when you're having a team, your job as the leader is either to coach them up or coach them out. So that because the worst thing that you could do to someone, I think, is to keep them in a dead-end job,
right,
because you're too weak to tell them they're in the wrong place. And there's opportunities to coach people. I mean, I've had people at our firm, one of my very key employees early on almost didn't make, and one of my colleagues wanted it, and I'm like, no, he's young, let's coach him, and he's developed tremendously. So you have to coach them, or either coach them up or coach them out in a way that they understand that this isn't the right place for them, and you're doing them such a favor by doing that, because they're understanding that, you know what, this isn't the right culture for me, or this isn't the right place for me.
But there's a finesse to that, because there's liability all around that. If you say it just the wrong way and suddenly they aren't the person for the job, they might take it like, well, wait a minute, you said a month ago I was the person for the job.
Part of that coaching them out is not you let them decide on their own. That's because you're giving them, and it's not like I know that they're coaching them out. I'm trying to coach them up and out, explaining what they need to do for both, and then they understand this really isn't for me. I don't think that I'm a fit here.
So there are new risks developing really all the time, including cyber attacks. And interestingly, I was reading 76% of business cyber attacks actually happen to remote workers. Tell me a little bit about how cyber is affecting what you gentlemen do.
Sure. Being in the risk business, we're very in tune with what's going on in the cyber market. You can't go a day without hearing about a cyber attack. It can cripple a business. So we address the cyber risk in a number of ways. First, we have a cyber consulting practice that we help companies evaluate what their exposure are to cyber risks in their systems and protections. It's something called a cyber blueprint that a chief technology officer can fill out in 10 minutes and really get a good sense for what their cyber hygiene is like. And then we give them, just like I talked about before, about the plan and help implement on how to combat those weaknesses. Obviously, we place cyber insurance, which is an important component of our sound risk management strategy. But we do a lot of education on where these risks are coming from, and you quote a very good stat. With everybody working from home, that the hackers, they're going after vulnerable targets, and they know that people working at home and getting more emails to their personal, having access to their personal email, they're attacking the individuals a lot greater than in the past.
What can be done to stop it besides just insurance and being aware of it? Are there actual proactive measures to prevent it?
One of the biggest proactive measures on any attack is what we call multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is when you're trying to log into your system. It's authenticating that you are who you say you are, and what it does is it sends a message to your cell phone that you have to then type in a second login to get access to that particular system. The other thing is just a lot of education on how these cyber attacks look and feel. They're phishing attacks. That's when the hacker sends you an email that looks legitimate, and they're trying to entice you to click on a link. And once you click on that link, the malware is being loaded onto your computer. So we run tests at our company where we send dummy messages or fake messages that are trying to see if people are paying attention. These messages look very real, but if you look really closely, you'll see that there's something wrong. Maybe the email address is one letter off, or it's an email from somebody that wouldn't normally email you, or they address you in a way that's not what you're used to. And so we're trying to give people an education on the keys, things to look out for to spot a phishing attack.
And also, it's important to, when they're going on websites, to try to save the actual websites, because they're very creative, and like it have the bank that they may go on to, and it looks like the bank's website, but it's really not. So it's important that, and then they click on, that's how they get access. So it's really important that you train your people, again, to the education. It's not only showing them what that looks like, but really reinforcing that with continually testing them, as Carl alluded to, but then also continually showing different ways how other people have been vulnerable and have been exploited by giving access to the system.
And so we're, I mentioned multi-factor authentication being kind of the preeminent protection, but the hackers are even evolving
Sure.
to that already. They've developed strategies that we've seen even this week that they will continually bombard the system to prompt a multi-factor authentication to me, and a lot of employees will eventually give in and they'll approve it, even though just because
It wears them down.
just because it wears them down, and so we're starting to see that being done.
And there's different ways when they put that malware on, they can actually do your keystrokes and everything. So it's really, one thing is don't have your password, or passcode. Don't put all your passcodes in one place. Don't have an Excel file that says all my passcodes.
Sure.
Right.
Don't make
Little-
it easy.
There's good products out there to help with that. I don't want to give I'll give a free endorsement to Keeper. It's a password vault that you can save all of your websites in and all of your passwords, and it's highly protected. You can't get into that without multi-factor authentication, but then it doesn't require you to remember any of your passwords. So our passwords at the Graham Company are 20 characters long, something that I would never remember
Of course.
on my own. So having the ability to keep it into in a system that remembers it for you is very helpful.
And another key thing is do not have the same password for everything, and a lot of people do that. You have
Yes.
the same password because it's easier. So they're smart enough that they can get it from your weakest link security of it and get the password that you put into, to go to the hardware store.
Sure.
And then they take that password
And
and
they
then
try
they
it
test it
everywhere
on
else.
all your other stuff. And you could do, with software, you could do millions of these, and you only need a couple to make a
Right.
very good living on their part to
To
do
hit
that.
pay
So,
dirt,
yes.
right? My goodness. So let's talk a little bit more about conflict management. Is there a way to really sort of restructure, retrain people to get out in front before there really is a conflict, to do preventative maintenance from the get-go?
Okay. So when I think about conflict resolution, it's really treating people the way you would want to be treated. Kind of go back the old-fashioned way
Right,
and
the
say,
golden rule.
and when you're talking to them, and really, first of all, it starts with giving clear rules and policies to follow. We talked about the policies, and then career goals and really responsibilities of the job. So when there's a conflict, that you have a document that you could go back to and kind of share with them to go through that. And you want to be, if you're meeting with your people and getting it, you try to get it before it boils over
Right.
to a certain point. And you'll get this when team leader, and some people just have these, personality conflicts, and it just
Right,
happens.
right.
And going back to earlier when we spoke about the personality traits and doing that stuff, from there you can actually go to the people and say, you guys are on the same team, don't use these words because they are offensive to that person. I mean,
It's a trigger.
It's
right.
a trigger, and those words could be like, I promise.
Right, right.
And because they don't like to hear that, depending on what their personality is, or trust me is another one. Some people.
Right.
So
Yes,
it's
kinda
things
same.
like that you should, if you identify that early, it goes a long way in helping.
The other thing, conflict is often rises out of miscommunication, and miscommunication occurs because people write in their own story into a situation that doesn't exist. Like we all, when I say risk begins and ends with people, you gotta remember everybody brings their full self to work. They bring the fact that they had an argument with their spouse, that their son is failing a class, or
Right.
something financial is going on. They bring all of that, and people could tend to write their own story into a situation that it doesn't really exist, and that only exacerbates the conflict. So you have to really be disciplined about not doing that. And then the other thing is just respecting, diversity of opinion and thought. That other people will have good answers or good ideas, and will do things differently than you, and being respectful of that, as long as knowing that everybody's really still focused and rowing in the same direction to accomplish the mission.
You've been doing this for 16 years and far longer in other areas as well. How have things changed? How is the landscape besides the cyber attacks? Any other big changes you've witnessed in your time?
things are getting a lot more litigious. The settlements, the value of settlements when there are claims are increasing at a very high rate. It's getting to be so many different areas that companies need to focus on that they can't handle it all themselves. And they really do need to elicit the help of experts. In this area that have talked a lot about today in human capital, is one of those areas that I don't think companies are fully equipped to handle on their own. The workforce is only becoming more challenging. People's, with the whole bringing social aspect and ESGs, environmental, social, and governance initiatives are only increasing, and it's just going to get more difficult on companies, and they need to rely on their partners to evaluate the risk and implement the solutions. They can't do it on their own, where in the past companies would probably could get away with it.
And the same for you. You've started your company and it's grown multifaceted now. How have things changed since you've been at the helm?
Well, I just feel like everything is getting so much more difficult for organizations to operate. There's more laws, more regulations that they need to follow, and they get caught in this, what I call the regulation trap. And what they're doing, the HR departments are all focused in on how to handle the things that if they don't do, they'll get, shut down,
Sure.
fine. And then the things that really the traditional mission of HR was to help build the organization and do the things that we've been talking about all day, gets lost because they don't have the bandwidth to handle both of them. So
Right.
as an organization, as we're consulting with them, we're saying, you may not have the resources to do it all. Either focus on one or the area and find partners to do the other.
Got it.
Or get the resources to do it.
Right, there's such a focus on compliance, they're missing the bigger picture.
Right.
And culture beats compliance every day. And so without the focus on the culture, there's inevitably going to be problems. And like Bill said, employers don't have the bandwidth to do anything but be compliant. And so they need that help from getting from compliant to establishing culture.
Is there ever a generational divide where it can go in either direction, where a new young employee fresh out of university or college or training comes with brand new exciting ideas, and established workers are like, wait a minute, who is this young cat who thinks they've solved everything, including how to cure cancer? We've been doing this forever, and it's working okay. And who do you think you are telling us? That's one way. Versus another problem area could be established workers who now are working for a 25-year-old boss who had more education, started at a higher level, and it's telling that it can go in both directions. Young people not so quick to learn, and older established people not so ready to hear it.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead, Bill. You want to go first?
So what I would say is that I remember my first internship and speaking to my boss, and he said to me, "We have the 6-6-6 rule here, and that's six days a week, 6 to 6."
Oh wow!
That was so that was a real change, and that was kind of like that was expected in the the financial industry at the time, and it was kind of like how everyone operated. I think that if I said that to any millennial today, they would fall off their chair, right? So what I think is that people who are older have experience or they've been working in the job or the industry for a long time. On top of it, the new people, when you go to a medical hospital, where are the best hospitals? They're attached to a medical school. Why? Because it's the latest and greatest things they're being learning. So when you can couple the experience with the latest and greatest, you could really form great teams. And the thing comes down to be able to communicate with each other, build that so that no one is offended in any way, and it's like together you could create mentorships both ways. A mentorship from the junior person mentoring the more established person, I'll say, and the more established person mentoring the junior person on operating.
You hit
It's
the
a
nail,
reverse
you hit the nail,
internship.
right? You hit
Mentorship.
the nail on the head. It has to be systematic, though. The good news is it's not difficult, right? It's not difficult to create a mentorship program, and I think you will be surprised on how well the employees adapt to it and really encourage it. So it's to bring the experience with the new cutting edge technology together is not as difficult as you think it might be.
And people are open to these reverse mentorships?
Yes, and I think there's nothing more rewarding than helping someone.
Yeah.
It's like when someone comes to you and they say, "Will you help me with this?" You feel like, "Yes, I do. I don't know what you want, but I want to help you." People want to help people.
All right. Carl Bloomfeld and Bill Rizzo, thank you so much. It was terrific, and thank you for watching Leaders and Industry Disruptors.